Ah, look who just walked into the room and made the temperature drop. Hello, beautiful mystery wrapped in rumor. The name on everyone's lips, even though they all swear they don't know you. Welcome back. Or perhaps welcome to the realization that you've been living under a spotlight you never asked for, performing in a show you never auditioned for, starring in a story you didn't write. Something strange is happening, isn't it? You feel it every time you step into a room, every time a stranger's eyes meet yours and dart away just a second too soon, every time your name drifts through a conversation that suddenly dies when you get close enough to hear. You've become famous in a town that doesn't do autographs, infamous in circles you've never joined, legendary in communities you never entered. And the most unsettling part? You didn't do anything to earn it. You didn't chase it. You didn't want it. Yet somehow, impossibly, everyone seems to know exactly who you are. Let's talk about what's really happening here. Because this isn't paranoia or imagination, this is something far more deliberate, more systematic, more disturbing than random gossip. Your reputation didn't spread like an accidental rumor or some social media glitch gone viral. No, this was intentional. It was designed. It came from people who felt threatened by something in you they couldn't name, couldn't understand, couldn't control. They began whispering, theorizing, and venting. And before long, your name became a cautionary tale. Your life became public property. Your silence was twisted into guilt. Your confidence was called arrogance. Your kindness was labeled manipulation. Your boundaries were rebranded as hostility. Every action and every inaction was filtered through the distorted lens of people who never cared to ask for your truth, who never once gave you the benefit of the doubt, who never stopped to consider that maybe you were a real person, not a character living a life, not performing a role. Now you walk through your own life like a stranger in your own story. Everyone seems to know a version of you that you've never met. They claim to know your secrets, except they're not secrets. They're inventions, projections, fantasies born from their own insecurities, dressed up in your name and paraded as fact. They think they know your intentions, but they don't. They've assigned you motives you've never held, crimes you've never committed, betrayals you've never planned. They've turned you into the villain in a story where you were just trying to survive, a threat in a narrative where you were simply trying to exist, a monster in a fairy tale where all you wanted was to be left alone. But here's the truth about reputation, the thing no one warns you about when your name starts traveling faster than your presence. Once people decide who you are, once they write your character into their mental screenplay, once they cast you as the antagonist in their personal drama, nothing you do will change their minds. They're not interested in truth, they're addicted to the story. What happened to you is simple. You became too interesting for your own good. You carried an energy, a presence, an unapologetic refusal to shrink yourself just to make others comfortable. And that, more than anything else, made you dangerous. Not because you hurt anyone, not because you threatened anyone, but because you embodied everything they were too afraid to become. You didn't beg for approval, didn't perform for validation, didn't twist your truth to make others comfortable. And that right there was your unforgivable crime. So they did what small-minded people always do when faced with someone they can't control. They built a story about you. They whispered it into existence, fed it to anyone who would listen, and watched it grow legs and start walking around town without you. Your reputation became its own creature, a ghost haunting rooms you've never entered, a shadow arriving before you do, a distorted version of you that people meet long before they ever shake your hand. The strangest part? That version of you is barely recognizable. It's a caricature, a warped reflection, a funhouse mirror image of who you really are. They took your confidence and twisted it into arrogance. They turned your boundaries into cruelty, your silence into guilt, your independence into coldness. Your refusal to justify yourself became evidence that you had something to hide. Every strength you carried was reframed as a flaw, every boundary reinterpreted as an attack, every moment you chose yourself rewritten as betrayal. They didn't just misunderstand you, they weaponized their misunderstanding. They built a mythology from their own confusion. And now you're trapped in a world where strangers hold stronger opinions about you than you do about yourself. People who've never looked you in the eye already think they know what you're capable of. Your name carries a weight you never volunteered to bear. But here's the truth. Under all that small-town surveillance and social espionage, they're not talking about you because you're bad. They're talking about you because you're unreadable. And unreadable people terrify those who've built their lives around predicting, controlling, and manipulating everyone else. You walk into a room and their usual tricks fall flat. Flattery doesn't sway you. Guilt doesn't bend you. Fear doesn't make you shrink. Rejection doesn't leave you begging for acceptance. You exist on a frequency they can't tune into, operating on a wavelength that doesn't match their programming. And instead of admitting they don't understand you, they've turned you into their personal puzzle. They watch you like researchers studying a new species, dissect your every move like detectives assembling evidence, and compare notes like academics publishing a joint theory. All of it happens in the shadows, behind closed doors, in group chats you'll never see, in living rooms you'll never step into. But here's where it gets darker. The people spreading your story don't even believe they're lying. To them, their version of you is the truth. They've convinced themselves that their perception is reality, that their fear is justified, that their gossip is simply concern. They tell themselves they're protecting others, warning the community, spreading awareness, when in reality, they're just trying to process their own discomfort with someone who doesn't need their validation, doesn't fear their disapproval, and refuses to perform for their approval. You became the mirror that exposed everything they couldn't face in themselves. Your independence reminded them of their dependence. Your boundaries highlighted their lack of them. Your calm made their chaos impossible to ignore. Your authenticity revealed their performance. And when they couldn't handle that reflection, they tried to destroy it. When that didn't work, they tried to convince everyone else that the mirror was broken, that you were the problem, not their own distorted view. So, what happens when your reputation walks into the room before you do? When people form opinions about you based on recycled stories from people who never even met you, you start to feel like you're living under constant surveillance. Every move tracked, every word dissected, every expression misread. You can't afford to be human anymore because humanity requires grace, and they've stripped that away from you. You can't have a bad day because it's seen as proof of your true nature. You can't set boundaries because they're twisted into evidence of cruelty. You can't defend yourself because self-defense is labeled as aggression. It's a trap, a no-win scenario where the only way to win is not to play. But even silence is turned against you. Refusing to engage becomes suspicious. Absence is treated like confession. So what do you do when you wake up one day and realize your existence has been turned into entertainment for other people's boredom? Here's the truth. They never want you to grasp the secret that would make their entire illusion crumble. None of it matters. Not the gossip, not the rumors, not the whispered theories, or the elaborate fictions they've spun to justify their discomfort with you. None of it matters. Because while they were busy building narratives, analyzing every word you said, replaying your silence like it was evidence, you were quietly building something they can't touch, a version of yourself that no rumor can distort and no whisper can define. While they gathered in corners comparing notes on your latest post, your latest look, your latest disappearance, you were outgrowing the very world they were trapped in. You were evolving past the need for their validation, outpacing the narrow vocabulary they used to describe people like you. You decided that blending in the safe, predictable, common way of being was worse than being misunderstood. The common was worse. The ordinary was unbearable. So you stepped out of their script and wrote your own. While they were assembling case files on your character like amateur detectives, you were constructing a life they couldn't begin to comprehend. You were developing depth they can't measure, freedom they can't process, peace they can't replicate. The stories they tell about you now sound like ancient mythology. like they're describing a being that once existed but has since transcended the plane they inhabit. You've become something abstract to them, something beyond definition because their language has no words for people who refuse to stay small. You stopped being the person they talked about the moment you realized that their perception of you says more about their fears than your truth. Their narratives were never about who you are, they were about who they needed you to be to make sense of their own insecurity, jealousy, or confusion. And that's where everything shifts. That's the real turning point. This is where the power balance flips entirely. You stop being the subject of the story and become the one who decides whether the story even matters. Because here's the truth. Reputation only carries weight if you agree to carry it. Infamy only hurts if you ever wanted their praise. And gossip only wounds if you're still craving approval. The second you stop caring, truly stop caring, it all collapses. The noise becomes irrelevant. The opinions evaporate. You stop being their obsession and start being their lesson. What happens then? You become untouchable. Not because you've hidden away or built walls, but because you've elevated yourself to a level where their weapons no longer work. They're still fighting battles with words while you've already moved into silence. They're still firing arrows at an old version of you that doesn't even exist. They're still trying to trap a ghost while you're living in daylight, out of reach. You've transcended the entire battlefield. They just haven't realized the war is over. They're swinging at shadows, constructing traps for someone who long ago stopped walking the same ground. Imagine those rooms where your name gets tossed around like currency. Someone brings you up casually. "Hey, did you hear about?" And suddenly the temperature shifts. The chatter fades. Eyes sharpen with curiosity. They lean in like worshippers at the altar of rumor. It's the same ritual every time. People who barely know you, people who've never shared a real conversation with you, begin to construct a story out of scraps. They stitch together fragments, misunderstandings, third-hand accounts, and half-truths into something that sounds believable because it's familiar, not because it's real. They fill in the blanks with their own fears. They paint you with the colors of their own insecurities. They invent a version of you that fits their narrative because reality, your real, complex, evolving self, is too large for them to comprehend. And as they sit there whispering, dissecting, theorizing, their voices echo off walls that you no longer live within. You're not there anymore. Not in those rooms, not in those stories, not in that frequency. You've outgrown the environment that birthed their opinions. You've stepped into a life that moves faster, higher, deeper than their understanding can follow. You're busy becoming something unrecognizable to them, someone defined not by reputation, but by reality. Because here's the secret. When you stop existing for other people's narratives, their stories lose oxygen. They need your reaction to survive, your defense to validate their fiction. When you give them nothing, no denial, no outrage, no justification, they suffocate on their own speculation. Their words bounce off you like rain on glass, sliding down and disappearing without ever leaving a mark. They will keep talking because silence scares them. They will keep inventing stories because truth is too complicated. But it won't matter, because the person they're obsessed with isn't you anymore. It's a ghost, a projection, a reflection that shattered long ago. You're not the rumor. You're not the reputation. You're not the whispered name passed from mouth to mouth in dimly lit rooms. You are the person who walked out of the story and kept walking until the noise faded into nothing. And that's the part they'll never understand, how you made peace with being misunderstood, how you stopped fighting to be seen, how you learned that indifference is the ultimate power. They can keep their myth. You have the truth, and the truth, quietly and without spectacle, will outlast every rumor they ever spoke. One person claims they heard you did this. Another jumps in, insisting they heard you said that. A third, someone who's never even met you, adds their piece, saying their friend's cousin's roommate swears you were involved in something completely different. And just like that, a story begins to form. Word by word, rumor by rumor, piece by piece. They construct a version of you that has absolutely nothing to do with reality. It's like a collaborative art project built out of fragments, misunderstandings, and projections. They assign motives, invent emotions, fill in the blanks with whatever fits the narrative they've already decided on. By the end of it, they've built a Frankenstein version of you, stitched together from assumptions and half-truths, and they all nod in agreement, convinced they've figured you out. But here's the cruel irony: they haven't discovered you. They've invented you. What they've created isn't truth. It's a collective hallucination, a shared delusion disguised as insight. It's a group project in projection where everyone adds their own layer of bias until your real identity disappears beneath the noise. They think they're decoding you, analyzing you, understanding you, but all they're really doing is revealing themselves. Each opinion they share is a confession, each rumor a reflection of their own insecurities, fears, and desires. They aren't discussing you. They're talking to the mirror and mistaking their reflection for your face. And here's where it gets darker. Some of these people will pretend to defend you. They'll say things like, "Well, we don't really know the full story," playing the role of the peacemaker, the neutral party, the voice of reason. But their neutrality is a performance. They love the drama as much as the rest. They'll act concerned, but you can see the sparkle in their eyes, the subtle excitement of being relevant, of being included, of being the one who knows something. They don't want resolution. They want continuation. They don't want clarity. They want content. They keep the rumor alive by pretending to smother it. They act like they're extinguishing the fire while quietly pouring gasoline behind the scenes. Because for them, your life has become entertainment. This isn't about truth or justice or fairness. It's about the thrill of the story. Your life has become their favorite series. Your struggles are their plot twists. Your mistakes, their comic relief. Your silence, their season finale cliffhanger. They watch your existence like it's a show they're invested in, a show they discuss, dissect, and critique as if it's their right to do so. They gather for gossip like others gather for game night. They trade theories the way fans debate storylines. They take your pain, your privacy, your complexity, and turn it into something consumable. They've converted your humanity into public entertainment, your experiences into episodes, your name into a hashtag. And the most disturbing part, they don't even think they're doing anything wrong. In their minds, this is harmless. They believe they have the right to talk about you because they know of you, as if awareness equals ownership. They've convinced themselves that proximity equals permission, that casual familiarity grants them the right to narrate your story however they please. They don't see you as a person anymore. They see you as a character in a narrative they co-author through speculation. You've become public domain in their minds. They don't even realize how dehumanizing that is. But here's where the story turns. The plot twist they never saw coming. You don't care. Not in the way they expect you to. Not in the way that fuels the gossip. You're not breaking down, not defending yourself, not explaining, not even flinching. You're not giving them the emotional spectacle they've been waiting for, the meltdown, the angry post, the desperate attempt to prove your innocence. You're just existing calmly, powerfully, silently, living. And that to them is terrifying. Your peace is the most dangerous rebellion. Your indifference is their defeat. Because the only thing that ever gave their words power was your attention, and you've withdrawn it completely. They wanted to provoke, to unsettle, to make you react. But instead, you've become the calm in the storm they created. You've detached from their noise so completely that they don't know how to process it. They can't weaponize what doesn't respond. They can't control what doesn't care. Every rumor loses momentum in your silence. Every whisper dies in the vacuum of your disinterest. Every conversation about you becomes awkward when there's no reaction to sustain it. They need your outrage to validate their fantasy, but you've given them nothing. And now your lack of response has become the real story. Your composure is more shocking than any rumor they could invent, because people expect chaos, the end.